Roleplay pet peeves. These are things that I run into on a daily basis, and they can be a real issue when you're trying to have fun roleplaying. First off is power playing. This is something that a lot of novice roleplayers do, or people that have gotten into the habit of being gods in a roleplay do, and it's basically when someone makes their character just fix every issue in a roleplay, or they can't be defeated by anything, like Superman's only weakness is kryptonite. Say that you started a roleplay with a lot of problems, like a prophecy with a castle, and the prophecy needs to be fulfilled. But these people, they just snap their fingers like that, and it's fixed. This saps all the fun out of it, because then there's nothing left to do in the roleplay, first of all. And secondly, you had this whole script planned out, or basically it's improv, but you had the whole storyline that you're going for, and they kind of just fixed it instantly. Another thing is god modding. This is something that I run into almost every single day. It's when someone tries to control your character so they can do stuff that they want to do instead of what you want to do with it. Like, say your character walks into a room and the other person says, "Oh, your character's so terrified, they can't even move." And then you're just like, "No, that doesn't fit into my character's personality." But they insist that that's what happens. Or you encounter another character and the other person goes, "Oh, I'm so enchanting, you just fall head over heels for me, I'm so beautiful that you will do anything for me." But that doesn't fit into your character, or your character already has someone and doesn't make any sense. This can happen a lot, and it can be really frustrating when the person insists on doing it. It can be minor stuff, like the liking a character thing, or it can be huge decisions that the other person decides for your character. Now, it's fine if you're trying to progress a roleplay, like it's something that your character would naturally do, but other than that, it doesn't have any use whatsoever. Another thing I run into a lot, is people ignoring your ideas flat out. This is something that is a major thing and is really common in what I do when I roleplay. Basically, say you already did something and the other person had something in mind. That's okay, right? But then they go something like, "Oh, that's not what happens, that doesn't happen." And then they switch around the entire scenario even though you were already doing your first idea. This can get very, very frustrating when you're role-playing, as all of your ideas are just gone and they won't stop. This brings me on to another thing involving roleplay ideas, which is not specifying before you roleplay. This is something kind of minor, and it only happens with the people that are starting out with a roleplay, but it's when someone jumps into a roleplay with you, but they don't specify what's happening. There's no set scenario, prophecy, characters, personalities, or anything. You're just going into it. This can also get confusing because you don't know what you're doing, but the other person thinks you're on the same page even though they didn't describe anything. This can lead to you completely quitting the roleplay because you have no idea what's going on half the time. Huge problem if you're even trying to roleplay with them in the first place. Another thing that can get really annoying is forcing ships that just don't work in the first place. Say you have two characters that despise each other and suddenly they're in a relationship. I mean, what? If they don't get along, or it looks like it's doomed to fail from the start, why even start doing it in the first place? Forcing ships that don't work, like when you want two characters to get together, and the other person doesn't, then why even do it? If you're wanting to do that, it makes it less fun for you, or the other person that's being forced into the ship. Ships can be fun to play around with, like if one person loves the other one, but the other person doesn't return it, which can lead to drama, which is always helpful in a roleplay, but other than that, it doesn't help at all. Another thing that really bothers me when I roleplay with people is piggyback writing. Piggyback writing is when someone just goes along with anything you say. Say you're pumping out entire logs of character dialogue, where two or more of your characters are arguing over an important decision. The other person has kind of a main character, and when they respond, it's just with something like, "Sure, okay." It's like they're basically there to spectate and just agree with anything you do. Which can get really annoying, because then it feels like you're carrying the entire weight of the roleplay. Now, this is fine if you created the role play and you're kind of leading the story plot on because you had this whole idea. But if they're the ones that started it, or if you're pulling almost more than half of the role play, then what is even the point? If they're just going to agree with everything you say, they could just go watch a movie, because that's basically the same thing, just spectating as everything else happens around them in the role play. Another thing is switching character personalities. Something that their character would not do normally. This can get very, very confusing, as the other person's doing something like they have an angry or sassy character, and suddenly there's this sweet little cinnamon roll. That doesn't make any sense, and it can get confusing, as you have no idea how they're going to react, and your characters can't do anything about it, or you. Another thing is jumping into a roleplay where they don't know anything about what's going on. Say you're roleplaying Harry Potter or Warrior Cats, and they just jump in and they don't want to do anything about it. Like, I was roleplaying in a Harry Potter roleplay once, and this kid jumped in who wanted to be an edgy demon from heaven who fell down to hell. Heaven and hell don't exist in the Harry Potter universe. So I was telling them that doesn't work, and they started accusing me of switching the entire story plot around, even though they didn't know what was going on. As with the Warrior Cat example, it's someone who isn't a cat, and yet they're in the roleplay. Like, the spirit badger is fine, but if you're a wolf in a cat roleplay, that doesn't work. Also, befriending characters that don't get along very well. That is something that really, really annoys me. Like two characters who don't get along at all and the other person suddenly wants to make them friends. If you're already established they don't like each other, what's even the point of doing it? That's something that doesn't work, and it kind of takes the fun away from the roleplay. Finally, switching plot. This is something that screws up the entire roleplay when someone just switches around everything you did and changes the entire plot basis of the roleplay like halfway through it. That doesn't work. If they wanted to do that, they could go write a book, because otherwise it's just switching around the entire basis of the roleplay, and it doesn't get you anywhere with anything. It switches around the entire character's goals, hopes, dreams, backstories, personalities, everything just switches around if you change the plot of the roleplay. Which can get very, very frustrating and confusing and annoying, as what was the point of role-playing in the first place? Oh, and another thing is confusing time clocks. This is something that isn't very much a bother, but it's when someone starts changing around the times or moving through stuff very, very fast. It kind of makes it confusing as your characters and you can't keep up with what they're doing, or the days are just passing so fast it sucks everything out of the roleplay and it's finished within, a week? That also gets me to rushing through special moments. Whether it's a romantic or argument between two characters or a battle scene in a fantasy or sci-fi one, rushing through it can make you feel like they don't appreciate what you're doing, or the roleplay goes way too fast for anything to count. This can happen anywhere, like if you're doing a Voltron, Warrior Cat, Harry Potter roleplay, or just even a Scythe roleplay from the new book series. Rushing through the moments can get you nowhere, and it feels like you're just going through a drain with the entire thing. If they wanted to rush through it, they shouldn't have roleplayed with you in the first place, and taking your time really helps when going through some of the moments. You can't really rush anything, and you need patience when you roleplay. Otherwise, rushing through stuff is not going to make it fun for you or the other person, as characters can't really form bonds, relationships, rivals, enemies, or anything. There's a lot of pet peeves in total, and I run into them a lot. With this list, try to work on them if you have any of these issues, because otherwise it's not going to be fun for you or the other person most of the time. Because running into these a few times, or just even once, can screw up the entire fun of the roleplay and the roleplay itself.